Welcome to Season 4 of the PaleoPost Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things human evolution, ancient art, and the stories that connect us all. I'm Seth Choggy, joined by my fantastic co-hosts Genevieve von Petzinger and Dr. George Nash. This season, we're taking you on a journey across continents and millennia, from the mysteries of rock art to the exciting prospects of my upcoming move to Portugal. We'll be chatting with some incredible guests, diving deep into the art and culture of our ancestors, and exploring the cutting edge of paleoanthropology. So buckle up for this season full of discovery, fresh perspectives, and a few surprises along the way. Hit the subscribe button and join us as we uncover the secrets of our shared past and chart new paths for the future. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, friends and family of the world of paleoanthropology. Today, we are having another episode of the PaleoPost Podcast, a special episode, one that I think we're going to see a few more of during this season, and that is we have a special guest that Genevieve has brought on board, and her name is Dr. Barbara, and I'm not even going to try to say her last name because we've been struggling for like 10 minutes with the audio trying to get it right, and I'll let her pronounce her name and let her introduce herself. There we go. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Maybe you want to tell us how you got to be next to Genevieve. Like, you're just, who are you?
She popped. I know, I'm so excited. I just have to say how excited I am to have her here too. So
my name is Barbara Oosterwijk. People always have trouble, well, not in my country of the Netherlands, but outside of the Netherlands, people have trouble saying my name. It means something like Eastern neighborhood, translated. I am an archaeologist, rock and cave art specialist like Genevieve. I did my PhD at Durham University on a specific type of cave art that I dubbed myself embodied markings. So markings that were made with the hands and fingers and were projected to surfaces. So I did my PhD there. I finished it in, I think, July 2023.
it's a blur.
Yeah. And then I started a postdoc at the University of Exeter on Amazonian rock arts, which is also why you kind of asked me here. I've heard.
Yes.
I've done a lot of experimental research there, and also tried to kind of put my own passion for the embodied markings in there by looking at handprints specifically. So I can tell you a lot about that at the site.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think I told you that the viewers, we always get asked about the Colombian rock art.
Yeah.
So It was really exciting when I was like, she's actually going to be here working with me. So we're working together now. And so that I was like, oh my gosh, we can make it happen for the viewers. Yeah. So it was really cool. And so that's, of course, there is hands on the panel down there.
Yeah.
Which is
lots of them.
Yeah. Of interest to me too. So there's lots
Hands,
of cool.
Hands are very interesting. Just yesterday I got fielded the question once again: are missing fingers amputated fingers? Are they symbols? Are they codes? Maybe since you did your PhD on that, you have a few ideas, but not on that exactly particularly, but on handprints and whatnot. Maybe you have a few ideas, but
Oh, did you avoid it?
I tried to stay away from it. You can compare it to lots of stuff, like in Australia, for instance, where there's a lot of it has to do with sign, like a lot of stencils have to do with sign. If you look at it also, it's mainly Gaga and Cosquer, I think, that have the missing fingers. And if you look at it, the overall record of it, I don't even think it's that many of them.
No, it's a very small percentage.
So
But I'll wade into the debate.
Of course.
but no, because it was Michel Blanchet, who was a French researcher who went to Australia and actually learned from the first people down there and had them teach him how to properly do projected negative handprints. And he was able to show that the angle was that they were bending fingers over, because it changes the angle that it sprays onto a wall, right? Like if you think about using a spray can modernly, if it's a straight line, it's going to spray like this. But if somebody's hand's a little bit bent because they've curved fingers under, it's going to go up at an angle. So his argument based on that was that the fingers were either curled over, but that there was no evidence of mutilated fingers or frostbite, or like that the hands weren't flat against the wall in a way that suggested the actual digit was missing. It was more that they had been moved in different ways. And I would lean into my thing, like I say, with all of the art, which is that in different times and different places, it probably had different meanings.
No, fun fact, actually, since we're talking about South America, is that during my PhD, I was looking at like these kinds of things, science. And I found that in some Maya caves, I think in Mexico and Belize, they found shadow animals. So they had hand stencils that actually depicted shadow animals.
So kind of like when we were kids, where we do things like make little... Really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
So there you have it.
Did the animals correlate with actual animals in the environment, or were they more mythological?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Look up exactly, but it's
I almost have a bachelor's in cultural anthropology in Latin America, so I have not focused, and it's really kind of I'm forgetting the name. 12,000-year-old site. Something Verde.
Monteverde.
Yeah, Monteverde. So basically from there to like the Aztecs is my knowledge base, and that's kind of
cool.
it. There's not very much within there either, because I've been bioanth this whole time up until very recently. So I'm very excited to hear. There's a lot. That's the thing. People think like there were the Mayans, the Aztecs, and maybe the Olmecs, and like we're done.
Yeah.
No. Just like in North America, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of tribes, groups of people, indigenous groups.
650.
650. Good.
650. There we go. George with his exact knowledge. I love it. But so there's a lot to learn.
Well, that's the thing with Colombia, as well, is that, okay, this sounds really funny, because again, like when you're outside your own knowledge area, and I didn't realize how far the Amazon came into Colombia, for instance. And so, but like, or the exact location where the art is.
Peru,
tell them about it though, but it's like, tell them about the physical location, because that kind of blew my mind, because they're those, what do they call it? The tabletop mountains?
Yeah, there's a tapirs, so it's kind of like it's part of the same formation as Roraima, so the big plateau in Venezuela, which is one of the oldest rock formations in the world. Also, so that it's part of that formation, and it's kind of like at this transition zone between the savanna, the steppe, and the tropical rainforest. So that's why you have it's very diverse also in matters of plants, things like that.
So we have our tabletop. Let's paint the picture for the viewers. I always like to do that.
It's a very prominent place. Yeah.
So is it kind of like flat? And then I'm trying to remember, because I've only seen them in Venezuela, and they've got like waterfalls coming down the side. Honestly, we think of arachnophobia. I hate to say it, but they use the tabletop. But in Venezuela,
the Lost World.
The Lost World, right? Like that whole.
It's based on Roraima.
So is it on the outside of the rock face of the big?
It's a more miniature. So it's kind of like you have the tropical rainforest. So it's very forested, very green.
Okay.
And then you have these hillsides, but Cerro Azul, so the specific site is very it's a very prominent.
And so it pokes up out of the jungle.
Yeah, you can see it quite, and some of the, you can't see the the paintings, but you can see that there's something going up.
Okay.
And there's another site, Nuevo Tolima, which is in proximity of Cerro Azul, which is something similar. So it's like this rock face, and it has very prominent position in the landscape.
So they're picking places where, because I saw some photos, and that was where I hadn't understood where it was until I saw photos from her, and then I was like, because she was like, you were looking out over.
Yeah, you have an amazing view.
You're looking out over the whole landscape, which is below you, so it's up high, and it's clear, like it's more opened up. Or is it kind of under the trees, or
the canopy kind of obscures the view. So it's you have to go to specific places on the tepuy. You have certain panels that are very difficult to access, where you actually have to climb, and some of these have like a quite quite a good view of the surrounding landscape. But most of the panels that are more like better accessible, probably, I mean, we've done some research which has not been published yet with GIS to look at intervisibility and things like that. But it looks like the canopy was probably too high for it to really have this big view over the landscape. But of course you have to reconstruct what it would look like at certain times.
Well, I was going to say, was it at different points, has it always been a huge jungle, or have there been points where it's been more like a savanna or an open place? Because okay, this is the other thing. There's so much to talk about, but it's like where there's just layer. Like people repeatedly use this across thousands and thousands of years.
You have a lot of layers, and they use similar pigment. We can see some yellow, some red. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
See, now you're trying to envision it too, aren't you? Yeah.
Well, I want us to take a step back real quick, because I know, Genevieve, you mentioned many of our guests have, viewers have asked about the rock art in Colombia, but many are unfamiliar. So why don't we rewind a little bit and kind of talk about what we're talking about? Because you're explaining these panels and all the different, for thousands of years, but what are we talking about? We'll have images up. We'll have our wonderful producer, Darren, put images up that we have, but why don't we rewind a little and talk about when was the site discovered or rediscovered by archaeologists? Kind of, let's get a little, if we can, details on the site, and then maybe explore it a bit.
What do they call it? The 30,000. So get out to the 30,000 foot. Explain this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Back into the jungle.
So I mean, it has been known by the indigenous communities for quite a long time, but a lot of excavation, archaeological research there was actually after the truce. So after 2016, of course, because it's in an area where there was the Colombian War, so it was. You couldn't really get there that easily. So the people I work with, which are from two universities in Colombia, Antioquia and in Bogota, and then University of Exeter, they have a big project called The Last Journey, which is researching mainly the colonization of South America from Colombia, mainly like plants, lithics. And that's when, they kind of found out that the rock art was really interesting as well. And because of the excavations they did there, and they found out it's like, 12,500 years ago that it became inhabited by people. And then they also found, they have a pen, actually, there's a rock shelter on the base of the Tepuy. So you have this Tepuy mountain that we just discussed, that has about, I think there's about 10 rock art panels, over 3,200 paintings. But there's a rock shelter where they did an excavation, and this rock shelter has some paintings as well, but the paintings are very, very disintegrated. So you can't really make out a lot of their subjects. But they did an excavation there, and they found a lot of ochre.
So a lot of ochre.
And in one layer, they found some ochre, and which was worked, so they could see that it had been used to, produce powder. And it was found in the same layer as some charcoal and a hearth. So they were able to date it, and that dated to, I think it's 10,000. What was it? 10,000. Yeah, about 10,000 years BP. So.
So it's pretty solid, hey? Now, when you say
absolutely.
of South America and Colombia, you're actually talking about like the Pleistocene people come. Like she's not talking about like Spaniards coming in. She's talking about
no.
The peopling of
South America is a better.
And sorry, that was called what, the Long Journey?
Lost Journey. So it's a big project, Lost Journey project, which is the project I was was working on. So and then I was hired to look at the rock art specifically. But my colleagues, so I have a colleague, Mark Robinson, who before I came to the project, who had already mapped a lot of the rock art. So he came up with like 3,200
but 3,200 figures in one area on one mountainside.
Yeah. But I mean, you have 10 panels. I mean, the largest one is, so these panels are some of them are about 10 meters high, and the largest one is about 100 meters long.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Whoa.
I've used the last year and a half to map and report them, but it's so much that I have not been able to map all of it because it's too much. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that process is like? I mean, are you like LiDAR scanning them? Are you 3D scanning them? Are you just photograph? Like, what is mapping a
Yeah.
panel?
So I luckily, like, my department had a Leo laser scanner, which I tried out, which is it's amazing. You just hold it, looks like Wall-E, basically.
It does.
And
Picture.
yeah, I can actually, like, so you just hold it and you scan it, and it has like a 0.1 millimeters accuracy. It has a range of about a meter and 1.2 meters, so it is more difficult to get like the whole panel there, because some of these panels,
Right.
as I said, if they're more than 5 meters high, you will only be able to map a certain area of it. You can't map it all. So yeah, I use that, and it doesn't need any external light sources or things like that. You just take it, you scan it, and then you also don't need to process it that much because it already makes the 3D models itself. So I use that and a combination of also photogrammetry. So because that's what I'm used to. So
she's a pro at photogrammetry. For viewers' sake who might be American, 10 meters is just over 30 feet high. And what was the width on the panel?
The longest one is 100 meters,
which is 320 feet.
Yeah.
So think about the sheer size. Do you remember? Well, there was the big headlines, right, where they were like, miles of panels found in the Colombian Amazon.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that viewers, for those who didn't know, that was the thing that made viewers ask, when are you going to talk about the art in Colombia? When are you going to talk about, that was the big piece. But so there we go. So 10 meters by 100 meters or 30 feet by 300 feet.
Yeah.
There we go.
So, and also just to make sure, these panels were already known for a long time by the local local groups, by the local indigenous community. So it wasn't that they were discovered by by scholars or by academics. It was already quite well known.
They were identified.
Yeah. The research on them became because of the area becoming more open also to the general public. Yeah. Because now it's becoming a more of a touristic. They really want to show the world these magnificent, panels. It's so spectacular. Like, I didn't even, before I went there, I knew what it was going to look like because I saw the pictures, but you're not prepared for what it actually looks like when you're there. Because it's so, the first few days I was just too overwhelmed to be like, okay, it was just like, how do I do this? I have to map all of it. And it's, and I was there for 2 months, the first time I went. So I just stayed there. And also just sometimes you just sit in front of a panel and you just look. Every time, because I've been back 4 times. Every time I go, I see new things. I'm like, oh, why did I never?
Yeah.
So much there. Yeah, it's an incredible place. Yeah.
So, what type of art are we seeing here? Are we seeing geometric signs? Are we seeing animals? Are we seeing people? Even everything.
Yeah. So you see animals. You see therianthrops, possibly half human, half animal. We see a lot of plants, actually, which is also very interesting. Unusual. There's lots of plants, which is unusual, and geometric, lots of different geometric, very strange looking geometric signs. So there's parallels at other sites, but some of them are very, very specific to Cerro Azul. And then you find these decorated handprints. So you have handprints that have like spirals in them and zigzag lines. And and me and a colleague from Exeter did a lot of experimental research also on to find out how they were made, because we still can't really figure out how they made these patterns.
Explain why it's difficult though. It's because it dries quickly.
Yeah. So we did some experiments with, we actually used some of the ochre that is found there, and we tried to print it, and you have to be so quick. And also, like, if you dip your hand in the paint and then you make like a spiral pattern, you have to immediately place it on a wall. And if you don't, I mean, and also imagine that some of these hands are like 10 meters high.
Right.
So you have to use ladders or scaffolding to get there.
But so you have to be really fast and get it on the wall before it dried on your hand, and then it would have been all wonky looking. So, but these ones look good.
If you look at them, all the fingers are usually overpainted. So usually if you would print a hand directly, you have like spaces in between the phalanges or in the middle of the hand. And here they are very neatly shaped. So they definitely repainted them. And
Yes. Yeah. Well, some of the art has been repainted multiple times too, right?
We think so. Yeah.
Looks like so. Well, Mr. George, or Dr. George, I should say, but you've been very quiet, sir. I was going to say you've been in South America, but never in Colombia. What was your experience? Like, were there plant images at your sites too?
Yes, there was. I mean, I should start off really. It started off at Newcastle University. I actually examined a PhD and I'm going to mention the name. She's a lovely lady, Ana Nascimento, who was from Brazil, who did a PhD on the capivara, which is in northeastern Brazil. And that was an inspiration. So I examined that PhD, I think around about 2014, but I'd already been to the capivara in 2008. And it forced me to go back again. And I like Barbara's site, the capivara is stuffed full of these very, very long frescoes, which extend many tens of meters. Usually you've got plants, you've got human figures, and some very, very unusual sex scenes in them. I've just thought I'd throw that one in.
We don't see those, unfortunately, but it seems very fitting again that they would have them the site where you go.
Yeah, we've got it there, and we've got it's a lovely scene there, which is really beautiful, where you've got a male and female kissing. It's called the kissing figure, and the figures, and the two are embraced in a kiss, and it just really humanizes the site.
That's very nice.
Yeah. So anyway, well, there's that. And talking of handprints, I worked in central Chile at 2017, and there they had handprints, but the most unusual handprints I've ever seen, in that they were yellow and blue. And the reason why they were blue is because the copper veins in the rock, they were actually grinding the copper into a paste and then applying it to the rock shelter walls. And I did a quite big project there with my colleague from Santiago University. And really, that's when I got all that information together, I decided to do, if I can get it out. No, I can't. Bugger.
You just disappeared.
We'll have a picture put up of it. There we go. Archaeologies of rock art of South American perspectives.
Which number is that, George?
I can't remember, but it is a very important. It was important in that, and this is the big problem with South America. And I think Barbara maybe support me on this. There's been very, very little, and it's again a little bit colonial, but it's there's been very little sort of publications coming out of South America because of obviously the Spanish and the Portuguese elements. Nothing's in English, and so this book that we did, we actually invited a lot of people from various parts of the South American continent to contribute to the book. So we've got a really good spread. And what was really interesting as well, when I was in South America, and this is again related to what Barbara's talking about the dating, we've always had that problem, as and I'm going to say this to you, but to you in particular, Seth, we have a big problem with the pre-Clovis issue. It has been and continues to be a bit of a pain, really, where nobody or very few people believe that there was something going on before Clovis. We've actually dispelled that now with obviously what we've been finding in North America, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But we've also got it in South America as well. I mean, when I was in Capivara, Nia de Guidon, who's a French anthropologist, and her colleague Anne-Marie Pressé had got dates of 27,000 to 29,000 on secure indirect dating on pigmented rock. So we've got some really interesting things going on there. You know, when we talk about the 10,000 limit, I think we can go back, and I would say I can't see. Maybe Barbara, you can tell us. I mean, do you have any dating at all on the Colombian stuff at all yet?
No, as I mentioned, I mean, they've done excavations at several sites, and the place has been inhabited for at least like 12,500, BP. So those are quite solid dates. So it's a very early site for South America. And then at Cerro Montoya, which is a rock shelter, they found the ochre, the works ochre, and possibly a piece of exfoliated rock fragments, so like possibly part of the wall. And that's 10,500 years as well. So but it's indirect.
Yeah.
So it's of course, if you find a piece, and it's interesting again, I mean, if you do like the experiments I've done with the ochre, like if you rub two pieces of ochre together, you get very specific grinding marks on them, and this is exactly what we found in these layers as well, and these ochre pieces. So yeah, it's definitely they were doing something with the ochre, and it's very likely that they painted, of course. So I mean, we do think that they probably started painting there very early.
Well, and one of the ways to prove that is because again, so for viewers and listeners who don't know, so ochre is iron oxide, so it's a mineral, and all of the different deposits often have slightly different chemical signatures. So there's the extra things that are in it might be a little bit different from site to site or from deposit to deposit, right? Because you find it in either chunks, you find it in walls, you find it sort of amongst other rocks. So what the first art team, shout out to the first art team, a couple of members, Sara, who's been on the show before, and Hipólito, went with you. Yeah. And so here's the key. Everything, when they're saying that it's indirect dating, what that means is they don't have direct dates from the paintings. They're making matches between like archaeological layers with things that look like they match with the walls, but it's not direct. So direct would be
if you find organic material in the, like if you take a sample of the painting and then you would find organic material in the painting, and you could paint it directly, which with charcoal,
which would be pretty cool. Or it matches the chemical signature of the ochre in the archaeological layer. If it's the same stuff on the wall.
Yes, but still, it still would be.
But it might be better.
It's still tricky, because I mean, it could also mean
that it was the same deposit used in a different time. Do you guys know where the original deposit is?
Yeah, we have some ideas, but this is also, the first art team are looking at this. So we're waiting to publish this, and we're waiting for the results for that. So it's all very exciting.
Well, we're getting this is in process, folks. So we're getting live and in the middle of it, which is really cool. So and of course, I mean, previous research has some of these things, some of your colleague, and so I think George knows as well, and Sarah. So people have been doing research on, I think, on Tolima, so on other sites, they've been doing some, some multispectral work. So it's not that we are really the first, but at Cerro Azul, to kind of map it in its entirety. And then as I told Seth and Genevieve before, Google Arts and Culture has done. With a drone, they made 3D models of all the panels, and this is something that is now online. So everybody can go check it out, in other words, and you should, because they're wild. And you can go, so we'll make sure there's a link, but that you can actually play with the 3D models of it, so you can actually look at the panels, and it will, Well, I think the big thing, though, too, is that, again, the big picture here is that we didn't even really, outside of the local folks who may not have even understood necessarily, because I think sometimes they don't always know how old things are. They know it's there, it's part of their environment and their world, but nobody's ever, sort of asked them about it or sort of come in to investigate. I mean, I think this is the start of the fact that that landscape is probably quite decorated, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's all in the jungles or in these locations, and they're hard to reach. Because again, you were telling me, it's like when you're there, like you're living in the very local small villages. It's gravel roads. Like there's no stores, right? That's what like the
No,
stores
really,
are
no.
like the stores are like several hours away.
No, it's quite remote.
Yeah, which is cool. But
So,
it's protected the art, but also means that people just didn't really know. But now everybody can see it, which is cool.
Yeah,
So.
no, and it's being visited a lot. So they really want people to come there. I mean, it's still like an area that
give us a link for that too, hey?
Yeah.
So in case anybody wants to go visit.
Yeah. No, it's really an amazing place. But it's still not that well known. Also, I mean, people that go to Colombia, for instance, they don't tend to. I mean, I've tried to promote it a lot to people because nobody's like, oh wow, do you have rock art there? And you have an Amazon in Colombia. Sometimes people are not even aware
even like
of
me.
this. Yeah,
I'm usually pretty good at my geography. Yeah.
Yeah. Same for some of those sites in Brazil. You know, it's.
I think the BBC have done a very, very good couple of summaries on the site, which are worth putting up on the.
Ella. To our other colleague Ella, who was the one who did that.
Yeah, it was amazing. She was actually with Mark. So Mark Robinson, who's also a colleague of mine. Yeah. In the Lost Journey project. So yeah.
So so people can track it down there too. But no, I think it's the I think that was one of the things we were sort of talking about beforehand, is that one of the big topics here really is the idea, again, which George is bringing up too, which is that it is so understudied down there.
Yeah.
And, I mean, because I was just bringing up, George, what were the dates out of Brazil that you said that your colleagues got there?
We had 27 to 29,000. What was really interesting, what was interesting, Genevieve, that the rock veneer of where the panel is on our overhang, which was painted, that had weathered away and fallen into the ground, and then obviously being built over with stratigraphy. An archaeologist managed to excavate it precisely and cleanly, extracted the organic material from the layer and dated the organic material. So it's an indirect date, but it's pretty conclusive in my view.
But here's the kicker, because you get those in France. I remember quite a few sites in France when I was sort of doing the big database work there in France, was that you get a lot of those things where, again, these things collapse because the rock shelters fall down. But that's the age it fell down. Yeah. The art could be even older. That's right. So that's
minimum date.
And then don't forget too, Seth, I feel like it was our very first, was it the very first episode we ever did where we talked about giant sloth bones being used as personal adornment?
Yeah.
And I was
it was.
And so that is the site of Santa Elena. Yeah. And 25 to 27,000 is the dates on those. So again, I mean, I remember when I was an undergrad, and I mean, George, I think I remember when your colleagues' dates came out, and like everybody made, well, not everybody, a lot of people made fun of their dates and said it was it's ridiculous. And like they got hammered for, that they were making some absolutely cockamamie claim. Like they really did. Like they almost got shoved in the corner with like the people who think that aliens made art. Like it was bad. You're like people were really strong about there's no way, it's not possible. And it's like, and that was like, what was that, 20 years ago, maybe? I feel like it was like...
Yeah, it was about 20 years ago. But what's interesting, Jen and Bar, is that there is so much conclusive evidence now, not just within Colombia, and Brazil, and also Chile, but elsewhere as well. I mean, again... there's a lot of stuff coming out now which tells us that we're dealing with early societies, and this is something I've been sort of nagging on about for quite some time. And the clue is not so much in South America, but in North America, in Oregon, at Paisley Caves, where they had the original date of around about 9,000, but they've now doubled the dates to 18,000. You've got Swordfish Cave up in Alaska, which has got a ridiculous date of 50,000. So it's more than likely that these people are coming over across the Bering Strait in waves to obviously to colonize south of the Laurentide ice sheets when the ice sheets were there between 15 and 40,000. But also, more importantly, they're going through Central America and then exploding into South America. And what's really interesting, an interesting story. There's I forget the name of the site and the excavator, but the excavator was American. he dug a settlement site in Chile, got a date of around about 45,000, but never published it because he was worried about the ridicule from the American establishment, who was still convinced about there was no such thing as a pre-Clovis. And again, for the viewers and the listeners, pre-Clovis is based on a Clovis point, a fluted point, lithic, a tool, which is there around about 10,000, but they claim there was nothing there before 10,000. So that's what I mean by pre-Clovis. So that's the big argument. But I think that's been, well and truly buried now, thank goodness. Forgive the archaeological pun.
There's so many sites that kind of disprove that. They were there much earlier, and most likely they came by boat along the coast. It's much to me also. It's much more. I mean, why would you go through this ice-free corridor? Also, it must have been really cold. Not very hospitable.
No.
And why not follow the coastline? If you would have all the ice, just follow the coastline until there's no more ice, and then
Kelp Highway.
Yeah, the highway. Kelp Highway.
Yep.
It's So I think this is quite a more less disputed.
I mean, but also too,
theory now.
The glacial sheets, we talked about this before. It's not like they were just in one spot the whole time. There was warmer periods and colder periods, and they would move. And so again, there was a time, lots of times during that sort of last big ice age sort of time period where the glacial cycle, where it was one continent on the entire northern hemisphere was one continent. What did we call it? Eurasiatica? It was literally one continent, because it was all the Bering Strait was a huge chunk of land that attached Asia to, and then it's already attached to Europe. It was one huge piece of land, and people were just moving around it. That's the thing too, that people were also back migrating. It's not even a one-way street. I'm sure people came, they went. I feel like there was a genetic, there was a genome they sequenced recently from near Lake Baikal that was actually a Siberian boy who had the closest relatives were actually from Alaska. And so it was a back migration. So I think we forget that people were just moving all over the place. And I think that this is partially, again, that leftover, I feel like there's still the cobwebs on it. We have to, we don't take it seriously as seeing it as being equal to the other parts of the world. I think we still see it as being.
We need to do a lot more research.
I tell you again, it does remind me of the Arabian Peninsula in many respects, about that movement from one environment into a green environment, which we were talking a few weeks ago, and then exploding into Asia. And I think this is what we've got here. That Bar's quite rightly said, it's bloody cold up there, and I think.
But this ice-free corridor, why would you even want to go through there?
It looks really unpleasant. Yeah, it's got walls of ice. It doesn't look like
going along the coast is just much more.
It's just sensible.
What
is it? The Occam's razor. If you had to pick, you would just go that way.
Yeah.
Well, and also
both. I mean, they probably did go through the ice-free corridor, but they were there before.
Yeah,
they were there before the ice-free corridor was even there. So, because it doesn't, the dates just don't add up.
No. Well, and I think the genetics show too that there's some very early migrations into from.
But still, there's a lot of missing data. I think we just need that's the whole more. Point. You need more. The skeletal material to look more at the genetics and look more at these things. I mean, there's a lot more research is needed, and it's been neglected in the past.
Well, and also I think the paleoclimate is a really interesting question too, is understanding more about how the climate was shifting, because of course it hasn't always been the Amazon jungle. I was reading some really interesting stuff about it wasn't even that long ago that there was points where it was more of an open plain with a river.
But that's the same, at Cerro Azul, if it was more of an open plain, it was likely more of an open plain, then the landscape would have looked different, and maybe they would have made different, if you could correlate that to different phases of
and
painting.
The plant types. If you could match the plant types to the different environments,
we're working on a lot of these things. I mean, there's so much to do there, and it's just, and too little time. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential at these sites to do research at. And the cool thing is, I've worked with my colleagues. Some of them are paleobotanists, some of them are zooarchaeologists, and we've all kind of bundled our forces. And because everybody's always excited about rock art, so we bundled our forces and we look at it together. And and it's always nice also just to hear what other people think about it.
Yep.
No, that's always the good thing. Like maybe some people that don't really know that much about it, if you ask them like, hey, what do you think? You might get like lots of new inspiration. And
yeah, that's a really good point. I actually had I wish I could remember his name right now and I can't. I had a lovely fellow, he was a rancher from the States, who sent me an email saying that he was wondering, because he grew up on a ranch, and that the little prints that all the cattle made in the mud. And he asked me about one of the sites in El Castillo, like in El Castillo, with all of those red dots that are in rows. He goes, that's exactly what the cow hoof prints look like in the mud. And I was like, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
So I always say that it's just, sometimes I think we're almost too close to it.
Yeah, you need fresh eyes. You need fresh eyes to look at it, and they can give you something that you may have never thought of.
Botanists, hello, if there's plants, that's awesome, because they can actually maybe help you know what plants they are. So
I think we nowadays, everybody, nothing is done by an archaeologist. It's all multidisciplinary. Everybody's sort of putting their 10 pennies worth in. I mean, I can't look at a rock art site, nor can anybody here, without having other people sort of putting in there, the geochemistry, the geospatial archaeology, etc. And this is what makes our research really exciting, because, as Barbara's already said, it's great to listen to other people, what they have to say about the site. And again, I dare say, we all have preconceived ideas about what is going on those Colombian panels, but it just takes one person just to turn it a little bit to maybe to a left view sort of idea, and before you know it, you've got a completely different interpretation about what might be going on.
No, also the indigenous communities and the guides there, they have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And with the University of Exeter and the two universities in Colombia, we organized like a big workshop, like a diplomado, we called it, like a course on cultural heritage management for the local guides. And this was amazing. And we did like experimental research with them, but it's also they have a lot of knowledge about things. So that's, it's also good to listen to them, of course. Yeah. This is important, especially in this.
Yeah. I was going to say, Barbara, very quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt, Jen, but has there been anything in terms of myths and folklore with the contemporary?
Yeah, Jose Iriarte and Jamie Hampson have published about this a lot. So there's lots of stories. Yeah.
Good. So we could probably link something.
Yeah. We have all the articles. I can give you all the articles about this. Yeah. So there's lots of and I've discussed a lot of the motives and categories with some of the guides that I worked with. There. Yeah.
So speaking of sort of understanding things about, like, again, using ethnography, and then also I think one of the things about like panels like this that are so interesting, and you can tell me more about it, is that because it's got the animals and it's got the humans and geometric signs, of course, I'm like, geometric signs are most interesting in my humble opinion. But the humans and animals are important too. But it's like, were they doing everyday things? Like, is this like are we getting a snapshot of what life was like?
Yeah.
At different points in
so you find hunting scenes. There's lots of like, which we know are mythical scenes, or it could be shamans, but also like probably material culture. So baskets, some of the geometric signs are actually baskets. Are baskets in material culture, or pieces of clothing or textiles. I mean, it's really like a really good combination of everything. Yeah.
So it's giving
animals that are being hunted, possible, like, half human, half animals. Then you have the hands, and you have the floral designs, and it's just all. And sometimes you have things that look like scenes, but in general, it's like everything is very.
Is it more like one-offs again, more like you see in the European sites, like where things aren't really
very different? Yeah.
Because like on a wall, you'll see like like say in Lascaux, you kind of got like your fat pony, and then you've got some other some Lascaux horses. But you've got your but they don't. That's my technical description, the fat pony. But the Chinese horses is what they're officially called. But it looks more like it's just floating by itself. Like you don't get scenes, you don't kind of get. There's not a lot of stuff.
For instance, you have like a lot of repeated subjects. So you have, for instance, these people that are all with their arms together. And some of them have, they have kind of like these they're kind of like trumpets that they're wearing. They're holding palm leaves, and you keep seeing those back, and they kind of have tail feathers, and you find them back at different. And then you have kind of like some of them that are quite complex.
Okay.
Some of them are more standardized, but you also have these people that are just walking like that, and you can see usually a phallus, some legs, arms. Some of them have heads, some of them don't. Some of them look like they're carrying tree trunks.
Okay.
So but there's repeated themes.
So you're saying, like, does it look like ritual dance kind of situations?
Yeah, that's what we think.
So could the change over time, like the different styles, be, and maybe it's the same group of people, but as time moves on, they're depicting it differently?
Yeah, or there's more like an abstractization, or it's becoming more complex later on. I mean, if you compare it, for instance, into GDP Kette, there you have, for instance, their animals have decorations inside of them, and this is something you don't see at Cerro Azul. So there's differences. There's lots of similarities, but so
the other site you mentioned is another site in the area.
It's a little bit further away.
Okay, is it still in Colombia, or is it
still in Colombia?
Okay, okay.
But there's lots of parallels between these two sites.
Okay, but also then you're getting the local differences, which again, now that I'm thinking about it, that's actually a cool piece though too, because we're missing all the backstory.
Yeah,
like we don't have any backstory in the European stuff, right? So it's like, but to see that, even two groups that we would consider from our point of view in Europe to be the same culture group, there are differences in how they're depicting things.
There's probably like different groups,
the personalization.
And they might look similar, but I mean, it's also like you find all over the Amazon, you find very similar kind of motifs. So it would be really interesting.
We've seen the capybara.
There's parallels there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, talking of the dancing scenes, there is a repeated scene where you have 3 or 4 people, stick figures, holding onto a tree, and they appear to be dancing around the tree. And so a lot of these parallels that we see in your site, we're seeing also in capybara as well.
Yeah. So that's again where now we're seeing almost like the meta culture, right? Or like the repeating themes, like the meta themes, and then the personalization within different tribal groups or different indigenous different pieces.
Yeah. But also, I mean, I know, for instance, like some motifs, like you have zigzag lines that sometimes can be, these kind of can be interpreted as a river, or as a snake, or the anaconda. But they're also kind of like these sacred patterns that you find on the Moloka, which is like their longhouses. So these patterns itself, or they're found on headdresses, for instance. So they can have so many different meanings. So they're both figurative and non-figurative. It just depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
And it's difficult sometimes to find out like which of it is it, or is it just everything? Is it all of it?
See, and now that's like but it's interesting insights for what we're looking at in Europe, though, which is to get the sense of like, oh man, the zigzag has like 4 different meanings just in this one neighborhood area of like,
or a
what
spiral,
they're doing.
or
So
they're just some dots, because you do find like some finger dots there as well, which we don't really know how to interpret. And then of course the hands, you have some simple hands that are just printed, and then you have all of the decorated ones. So how did that develop from one thing into the other, or was it just people copying what they saw? It's
What about spit? What about spit projection, Barbara? Do you get anything? Nothing there at all? No.
Unfortunately, which it's one of my favorite ways of.
I know.
No, not over there. I mean, you do find it again in Argentina. Cueva de los Manos. And, although I only know about the stencils, I don't know if they found anything else. Like discs and things like that.
Well, because in the European caves, you've seen people from the Paleolithic doing hands. Also, you were saying like sometimes they go like this, right? And like
they would do like you cup their hands like that, and kind of like project on the wall, or use their their
fingers like that.
The index.
So are they actually sticking the pigment into their mouth then?
Yeah, I mean,
and just blowing it onto.
Yeah, and then also they just spray directly on the wall.
Oh, like just straight out of their mouth and just.
Yeah, well, and there's certain places, like for instance in Ardales, there's a big drapery that's like hanging like 2 meters from, like you have to climb a scaffolding now to get there, and it's completely projected with pigment. And it's the only way that they could have done that was either they climbed up there, they had scaffolding, or they maybe used like a very long bone tube and then projected it. I mean, it's yeah. So it's the same, at Cerro Azul. I mean, some of these paintings are so high, they must have used scaffolding, but it was, and you find some shapes there that might be ladders, but it's, again, some of these, trapezoid forms, yes, they could be ladders, but they could also be something completely different, you don't, and some of them seem like you have people that are climbing a ladder, actually. And there's at least 2 of those depictions at Cerro Azul that could depict people climbing.
So what about, is there any evidence, like, how like at Lascaux, am I right on this, you guys, like at Lascaux, there's actually some evidence of scaffolding, like there is some evidence
some
there.
Of them, yeah.
And so, but like at this site, is there evidence of any scaffolding?
I mean, you don't really have, you don't have the archaeological context in front of the panel.
Also, jungles make things disintegrate so fast.
But knowing the people there now, the people I've worked with, they were like, oh yeah, if you need some scaffolding for something, you want to do some work, they can fix that
just
for you.
Whip one up.
Yeah, so if they can do that, you have all the liana hanging there, and I mean, there's certain panels that are very high up, and you can climb up there.
So liana's that vine. Would they use that as their rope?
Probably,
and then they would just kind of.
But I mean, also they get all the palm, everything that you can use. I mean, you can build anything there from the material that you find in the jungle.
It's like Minecraft in real life.
Yeah, it's so strong. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. So that's because I think, again, those are the missing. There's so much insight that you can gain just in general about how rock art, like what are the possibilities for how.
But also, like, if you learn from the people how they work with the land, and what they, I mean, living in that part, of the world, in that jungle. I mean, you can use everything in the jungle. You can build like a shelter from some palm leaves. I mean, it's a very yeah. I mean, in certain ways, also, like, of course, you have a lot of wild animals, that you have to be careful of. But
the anacondas, you're saying
no, we saw a boa. It turned out like we were at this little river, and it was like, oh, there's a boa here. And then we went and I'm like, wow, there's a boa. And then it turned out actually that they had found it in someone's house and they had released it there. Yeah. So they kind of knew it was there. And I was like, and then when I found out afterwards, I'm like, oh, this is not really. Yeah. But they do have like, at the base of the tepuy, they have a wildlife camera.
Oh, okay.
And they sometimes have a jaguar and dantas. Dantas are, what are dantas? Not a capybara.
But something like that, same family.
What is a dantas?
Not pigs.
I can't.
Agoutis? I'm trying to think of this.
What is a dantas?
But are they rodents like that?
Are they? Yeah, they are rodents. Very big.
Capybara.
The capybaras.
I'm down with the. Are they? They're just slightly smaller, because I know they have a different one called agouti in, like, I think Costa Rica.
Dantas is something else.
Okay.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
But but there's lots of cool animals. But and are those depicted on the panels?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's one panel that's called dantas, which has 2 really big tapirs.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Are those the deer with the teeth?
Snow.
Yeah.
No.
We'll make sure we get a picture so people see. I do know.
One panel has 2 really big dantas. Yeah, and I mean,
okay, they're adorable though. Just for the record,
this is the baby one. Yeah, the baby ones are the cutest because they have this really nice patterning.
They have like a floopy nose, kind of.
Yeah,
that's right.
Oh, those guys. Yeah.
It's a technical term, floopy nose.
But you also have the harpy eagles that are the harpy eagles. Mostly that have nests on the panels.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Are they depicted on the panels too?
Possibly.
Sometimes, maybe. Yeah. Okay. And again, obviously, we're asking Barbara to slightly interpret things that are still very much in process. So
and also, like, I wasn't able to, because, as I told you, like, it's such a big site that I wasn't able to map everything. So I decided to, like, I'm gonna map certain things and look at those.
Well, you have to make choices.
It will take, like, if you really want to map everything and look at all this, because I mean, there's so many layers that. Yeah, you want to interpret all of that. It's just it's a lot. It's very overwhelming.
So with perfect timing for me to ask this, I wanted to ask this. So I know you've mentioned you haven't mapped all of it yet. It's ongoing work. It's probably going to be ongoing for quite some time. Do you have a figure of how many individual pieces of art or markings there are that you have so far, like 2,000, 5?
Mark Robinson, he identified about 3,200, but I think it's
Okay.
probably maybe double that. I don't know.
Wow.
There's also look
Yeah.
at the layering, of it, and
Right.
there's still other panels being found. Some of them, are of course the preservation there is sometimes not as good. So a lot of it is covered with lichen, and it's we're still trying. Like I tried out some infrared photography to see if you could figure out if
Sort of
anything
pull
is
some of it
underlaying.
back
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
but
The hyperspectral is going to be the key
Yeah.
to life.
hyperspectral.
We're working on that right now. Stay tuned. Because that can actually penetrate through even like light layers of calcite.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
Does
And then
it-
you could try to date it. Yeah, and that would
Yep.
be
Yep.
be
So-
awesome.
Well, and the rock shelter, you said there's very degraded art inside the rock shelter. Is it possible that it's older? Because here's one of the other things I wanted to flag for us. I mean, obviously we could talk about this for hours. So Seth, you need to be the time master.
Yes,
Tell
we
us-
are getting close to wrapping up, I would say. So why don't we
One last cool thing, which I
get
think
to our
people-
our last few things here.
Okay,
We can
well, I
always
mean,
we can always revisit later if Barbara is willing at a later time, so. But yes, why don't we talk about a few maybe
Yeah.
critical things?
the one thing I just wanted to flag for people was the preservation piece, because we were talking about that. Because so again, these sites are out in the open. Like the rock shelter's not, obviously that one's covered,
Right.
but the rock art in there is more degraded, which actually suggests it might be older.
could, yeah,
but
yeah.
it could just be a lot of water went through
It could
there, or
also be
something
the
happened.
specific, specific conditions there that's more humid,
Yeah.
because
But like how it rains. You were telling me it rains there like every day, basically, right? Like it's a rainforest. So those red paintings on those panels are being
I mean, the paint stays preserved very, very well.
yes.
Because it's
So-
so strikingly red at some places.
Like, so what the heck? That's amazing.
Yeah, likely they repainted it, they
Yeah.
overpainted it, they kind of kept it, so that it stays. Or also it could be like they prepared the walls in specific ways to keep it more, so that it absorbs better, or and they
Yeah.
did something with the paints. Like we did some experimentation, maybe, they used
Maybe use the fat.
latex or fats that makes it more sticky. We don't know. There's some missing information there. So
that's
we
fun,
would really
though.
like to find out
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
what keeps it so vibrant and so bright.
Yeah.
And
Especially if those lower layers are in that 10, 12,000 year old range, which you don't know yet, but if they are, how the heck are they still showing out in the open is wild. I mean, I think in Fosh Koa, in Koa Valley, I saw one spot where there was a tiny bit of red left under the edge of a rock there, and they thought maybe it was Neolithic, so like around 9,000-ish if they were lucky. But it was covered, and again, the Koa Valley is very dry.
Yeah.
Like it's a very dry.
no, and here
plateau
it is
environment,
true.
so-
It's very humid. I mean, there's lots of chemical weathering, there's lots of biological weathering, like with all the moss and the lichen, and which lichen could possibly actually also be used to date, maybe even.
Oh yeah.
But there's
of course.
so but there's some missing links there that we don't really know, like why it's preserved so well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
likely. I mean, overpainting is, especially if I look at some of the hands, it's definitely
They've
they
redone it.
repainted some of the fingers and the spaces in between the hands. So yeah.
But that's pretty neat. And because again, the preservation question is always so interesting too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could also differ per like some parts of the panel are very well preserved, and then some other parts are not. I mean,
There seems to be an intentionality by the artist to make damn sure that the penetration from rainwater and humidity.
It's very public. You see it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no way around it. It's not like some of the part that we look at that's quite hidden, and it's there. You can't miss it.
Yeah.
And there was likely a lot of ceremonial probably and public
Yes.
activities that took place in front of the panels that we don't really know anything about. So,
But also that care, the repainting, the care to keep it. I mean, I think we see that as well in places in Australia with the first people where they've also overpainted and continued
Very
to paint.
important. Yeah.
And so, and that can
Gives
often
it
be
more
part of the
power.
rituals too, right?
Yeah.
That they're actually strengthening the ties and doing things.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Absolutely.
think about it. It really shows you too how much we're missing, hey, in Europe. Like, I think that's where this so important to see what's happening in other parts of the world, because they all inform each other. That's what's so beautiful. So it's like every new site we find is like a whole new treasure chest of information that helps us understand everything about the ancient world. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So such cool work.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that sounds like a great place for us to conclude this episode. Barbara, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, hearing your stories. Of course, it has been wonderful, and perhaps we'll have you on again in the future as your work develops and you learn more, and as the site becomes even more fascinating. Everyone, if you like and learned something about this episode, please be sure to subscribe and like for future episodes. There's so much more in the world of rock art and paleoanthropology that is to come. We're going to have more exciting guests. We're going to have more fun with Genevieve and George, and it's just going to be a great time.
Oh,
Everyone,
yeah. And
what?
And I are next week. George and I are in Jordan together.
Oh, that's right. And you guys are going to try to film a few things.
What's that? Yeah.
And so hopefully we get those posted and you guys can view that, and that would be awesome.
So cool.
Although, to be frank, by the time people are listening to this, it's going to be way after you've been.
But it'll be cool
anyway.
now. Yeah, but they can see what we
Exactly.
We got Colombia this week, Jordan next week. Like, see, like we're traveling the world, checking out
World travelers. That
lovely gentleman who suggested the cattle tracks, his name's Don Bailey, so I wanted to give him a shout out. So that was
Don Bailey. There we go. All right.
That was a really cool idea. There we go.
Yes.
Now you can.
All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the PaleoPost Podcast. We had a great time. We hope to see you next time, and have a great time. And remember, there's always more to learn. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.